Hello and welcome to Mike's Garage. Today what we're going to do is we're going to mount a wheel. Mounting a wheel is not a big thing. The only thing is it is critical and there's things you should watch for, and there are things I do automatically, and for that reason I've written some notes for myself, because things I do automatically, I do them automatically, and you don't always think to tell someone. But before I get started on that, I have to tell a little story, which I don't normally do. I try to keep personal stuff out of these videos, but this one is just a little too good. It's a genuine story about brotherly love. Now, in building this bike, I had a beautiful 16-inch centerline wheel on the front, and that's what I was going to use. But I always run a 21-inch front wheel, and all my friends know I always run 21-inch front wheels. So my brother Ray says, "Aren't you going to put a 21-inch wheel on it?" I said, "Well, I don't have an alloy rim, and I really need one of those." So Ray brought me an old 21-inch wheel with an alloy rim on it. So I cut the old rusty spokes out of it, and I polished the rim. Then I had to go to the swap meet a couple weeks later to see my friend Billy, who was going to be there, my brother Billy. And Billy was there, and he had a 16-inch wheel with the proper hub to use my brake rotors and everything that I was going to use on the centerline wheel. So I said, "Billy, what do you want for the wheel?" He said, "What's it for?" I said, "Well, I just need the hub to build a 21 for the front of my Shovelhead." So he handed me the wheel. Now I had a hub and I had a rim. So I cleaned up the hub real good, went over and told my friend Kenny that I had gotten this hub and this rim and I was going to build a wheel. So he handed me a new pair of bearings for the 1-inch axle I was using. Another brother. Then my birthday came around and my brother Fred bought me a set of stainless steel polished spokes for it. So this wheel here is an example of brotherly love. And I love this wheel. Anyway, with it all together, I'd like to mention first that I put the brake rotors on it exactly as the factory recommended. The wheel is now balanced and ready to go. And the way the factory recommends is to use all new screws to hold the rotor on. So after cleaning all the threads, I mounted the rotors. And they are exactly as they are supposed to be. Now I'd like to show, and perhaps you can get the camera over here, that this hub, being a real late model hub, this space here is much larger than this space here. So in lacing the wheel had to be laced in the center between the two brake rotors. But this wide side goes on the right side of the motorcycle. So with all those things in order and the tire mounted in the proper direction, everything's ready to go. So I'm going to put the wheel in place right over here. Let it rest there for a minute. The next thing is what Harley Davidson calls an axle holder. We always call it a fork cap, and it is marked out. Let's make sure the camera sees that. Which means that part of the cap goes to the outside of the bike. Now we'll put the nuts and washers on. Now these are very late model legs, 2005, 2008, 2000 something, which is why we have the 1-inch axle instead of 3/4 like the earlier models. So all the bearings and everything are correct. And I put this on here loose. Now the axle, as per recommendation, should be lubed carefully. In a perfect world here, everything's going to work just fine. I have faith. I'm actually real excited because I love 21-inch front wheels. Not because they're better, it's because I love them. Okay, this axle is all lubed and ready to go on. So the first thing is to get the spacer that goes on the right side, slide it in there, slide the axle in place. I kind of cheated a little bit. I got this bike set at exactly the right level to do this ahead of time. Now I'm going to get the other spacer in there. And there it goes. I'm going to have to lift just a little bit. Make sure the axle goes in smoothly over on the other side. And away we go. Little persuader here. I think I want to lift the bike just a little bit more. Just a little. There we go. All right, now with the washers on, now all of this seems really simple, and it really is. But if you don't take the care to get it right now, you're going to have a problem. Now, I've been using this punch here forever to go through the axle. And I will tighten the axle nut. Just snug it up a little bit. And it's drawing the axle through very easily. It should. Everything in there is brand new. Now, the fender is out. The front fender is out being painted. So I took the opportunity to do this video with the fender out of the way. With the fender out of the way, I can check every measurement, check everything for centering. All I did was snug that up a little bit. And I'm going to do the same thing with those two nuts on the other side. On the, what do they call it? The axle holder nuts. Now, when you put those on, can we get the camera over here for a second? What we want to show is that these spaces here are even. I want the space on this side and the space on this side to be even, so that when you clamp it down, it clamps evenly on both sides. Did I get it pretty even? Yeah, it's pretty even. Okay. Now, it's not tightened yet. They're still relatively loose, so the axle can slide through. All right, now, what we want to do is tighten the axle nut. And the factory says 50 to 55 pounds. If I use a torque wrench, I'll bet I get it right. I got a socket here that's the wrong socket. Just a moment. Let me get the right socket as I step on my cord. I don't know what's wrong with this socket. Well, that should be a 3/4. And it is. So was the other one. All right. So with that punch in the axle to hold it in place, There we go. We're going to set this at 50 pounds. Let's see, book said 50 to 55. And 55 is what I like. 52, 53, 54, 55. And there is 55 pounds. Now that that's settled, the next thing is, and if you come over here a little bit, Fred, okay, what we need to do is make sure, like I said, we want to make sure that this was still sliding. And the point is, you got to be sure that this leg is not pinching, but you don't have your fork legs coming down like this. What you want is to make sure that that fork leg is floating, and it is. And they recommend 11 to 15 foot-pounds of torque on those two nuts. And we're almost there. The light is harsh in here. Let's see. Okay. And so we'll snug them up real good. We know that leg is floating now. And we want to keep those gaps even. There is one nut, and there's the other. And they're a nice even gap. Everything is beautiful. Now the next thing we're going to do is check and measure everything. I want to measure that the gaps are the same between the fork legs and the brake rotors, and that the tire is in the center of the motorcycle. And I'm kind of cheating because, like I said, I've already measured all that, and it's pretty good. Now, the next thing we'll do is I can take this brake caliper and I can put it on the fork leg. Of course, I had to drop that washer. Don't know where it went. And if I put the brake caliper on, and I'll pick that washer up later. If I put the brake caliper on and get the bolt snugged up, I can see that the brake rotor, or disc, whatever you prefer to call it, is centered in the caliper. And it is centered in the caliper. And that will work on both sides. And for now, we're done. But I feel it was worth mentioning and going over, and I hope that helps somebody. So until next time, see you out on the road.